We're looking at Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2. We're looking at the story of the wise men, which begins at verse 1 and goes down through verse 12. There are 4 Christmas narratives, and this is the second one. He begins his book, of course, with the genealogy, then moves into the first narrative, presents Jesus, his birth, and now has gone to the wise men. And it's a phenomenal story, and I want to take time to read the whole flow because we want to do kind of an overall view of the entirety of the story. Matthew chapter 2, beginning with verse 1. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men came from the east and came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. When Herod, who was Herod the Great, the king, heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and the scribes of the people together, he inquired of them where the Christ should be born. So they said to him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search carefully for the young child, and when you have found him, bring back word to me, that I may come and worship him also. But when they heard the king, they departed. And behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother. They fell down and worshipped him, and they opened their treasures. They presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Then, being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed for their own country another way. The whole story is surrounded with mystery, and been a lot of study that has gone on and research that has been done about the wise men. We don't know very much about them. This is the only account we have of them at all. They come, they go, that's it. Luke gives us the whole story of the shepherds, and of course the shepherds had come, and they were local, and they saw the angels in the sky, and they ran over to where the manger was, and they worshiped together at the manger scene. But not the wise men. I know in most of our nativity sets, the wise men and the shepherds are together, but that's not a biblical approach. We did that out of convenience, so we didn't have to have 2 nativities. But then I'm surprised the businessmen didn't pick up on that, and, well, never mind. So, but they didn't come together. This was probably about 2 years later, after the birth of Jesus. They're still in Bethlehem. Mary and Joseph have stayed there. They got a house by this time. And we get that, of course, from verse 11, when they had come into the house. So they didn't come to the manger at all. And they've been traveling for 2 years. They saw the star, and then they traveled for 2 years looking for the Christ child. Finally ended up in Jerusalem. And the reason we know that is because you'll note in verse 7 that Herod had secretly called the wise men. So he interrogated them. And what he was after, as he went after them and wanted information from them, what he wanted from them, to determine, in verse 7, to determine what time the star appeared. So he said, I want to know exactly when that star appeared. I want to know the date. I want to know the time. I want to nail this down. And the reason he was after that, we're given the answer to that over in verse 16 of this same chapter, where it says that Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, because they'd gone home another way, was exceedingly angry. And it's really you really get angry when people do to you what you do to them. I mean, don't you? Don't that just tick you off? Just really does me. And so Herod is really ticked off because what he had done to the wise men, now they are doing to him. And he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and its surrounding districts from 2 years of age until and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. So obviously what's going on is, star appears, they get the message that Jesus has been born, the new king has been born. They travel around the countryside. The star is not leading them. They don't know where to go. They see it, they get the message, and by faith they step out. And can you imagine what a process it was? Because they traveled with servants, they traveled with an army, small army. You had to feed all that outfit. You had to provide for the animals. You're traveling 2 years. You're going to have to buy food, get food along the way. I mean, this is no small effort. I mean, these guys are absolutely determined. Probably they saw the star and got the message, and some of the wise men, there would have been more than just this group. Probably some of the wise men that they were dealing with, friends, said, that's not true, and would have disagreed with them and didn't come on the trip. We've said that there was 3, but that isn't biblical either. There could have been up to 12. We got the 3 from the gift thing, but just because they gave 3 gifts doesn't mean there isn't more. So there could have been more than 3, up to 12. So they've traveled around the countryside all of this time. They probably left their families, no doubt. Left their family, said, hey, wife, here's some money. I'll be back in a couple months. Hey, no big deal. But now it's gone on to 2 years, and they've just traveled around the countryside, absolutely determined not to quit until they find the newborn king. They are determined. And when it comes down to it, what do they get out of this? They aren't looking for a business deal. They're not looking for some kind of healing. They're not looking for a solution to their problems. They just come, worship. That's it. No agenda but Jesus. It's got to be a sermon in that, folks. No agenda but Jesus. It's phenomenal. They received nothing at great expense. Now, as you look at this whole passage, it has a central theme that I want to try to present to you today. There is one word that shows up 4 times. And it's not a big word. It's not a word that you're unfamiliar with. It's not, you gloss right over the top of it. I get that. So maybe I'm not making too big of a deal out of this, because it appears every single time that Matthew wants to say something specific and particular about the actions and response of the wise men, he uses this word, which gives you something of a clue that this word literally is the undercurrent of everything that's going on within the heart and the mind of the wise men and what's driving them, which obviously then should apply to your life as well. So as we walk through this, I want this to come front and center to you and into your circumstances. The word is the word seen or saw. Now, if you look at verse 2, it shows up. They came to Jerusalem asking the question, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. By the way, this is the Greek word adu, which is a word we've mentioned in a certain tense. It shows up as oida, and it's one of the 4 words for know. And we want to discuss that. But it shows up in verse 2, adu, which is the word seen. And then it isn't verse 6, as it shows on the screen and in your notes. It's really verse 9. I'm a little upside down sometimes. And in verse 9, never mind. In verse 9, when they had heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen, there it is again, in the east, went before them. Now, if you go to verse 10, there it is again, adu. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. There it is in verse 11 again. And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary. So it shows up 4 times. The word is a significant word, and we've probably walked through this before, but bear with me. There is 2 word groups that they literally reached out and grabbed a hold of and intertwined, meshed together to form this word. And it has both meanings intertwined. In other words, it doesn't mean this or it doesn't mean that. It means this. So it's a combination of this. And you can't have one without the other. So it's an infiltration of these 2 concepts, these 2 ideas. Now, one word group that this adu means is the idea physically to see. There's no question about that. All the way through the passage, the wise guys are actually seeing. They're seeing with their physical eyes. They actually saw a star with their physical eyes. They actually went into the house, saw, oh, there's Mary. Wow, there's the Christ child. Probably a toddler by this time. So they're actually seeing with their physical eye. There's no question about that. Seeing is a big deal. However, as you go to the New Testament, the verbs for seeing in the New Testament are many more than the word for hearing. But the interesting thing is, the idea of hearing in the New Testament is much more important than seeing in the New Testament. The New Testament downplays physical seeing and upplays hearing. Probably in our culture we're the opposite of that. But in the New Testament, did you get that? In the New Testament, the verbs for seeing are many more than the verbs for hearing. But in the reality, seeing is not as important in the New Testament as hearing. You say, prove that to me. No problem. We have no physical description of Jesus. Why? Because they don't give a rip what he looked like. You know what they care about? What he said. And the amazing truth that came out of the demonstration of his life and what he had to say. And what they want you to get in the New Testament is, hey, listen, hear what he said, man. Grab a hold of the lifestyle. Get a hold of the amazing truth that's contained. Well, did he have blue eyes? Well, probably, because great people have blue eyes. But that's not what we're discussing. See, that doesn't matter. That's not what we're talking about here, people. So no description of Jesus. Why? Because it doesn't matter. Was he tall, short? Nobody gives a rip. Is this about, was he overweight? Probably not. But how? Who knows? I don't know. It doesn't even matter. Why are we even discussing it? I don't know. It's not the idea of seeing. It's hearing. Because hearing really matters. Well, prove it to me. Isn't it interesting, in the crucifixion event, we have absolutely no details of the crucifixion event. We have lots of details about what went on around the crucifixion event, but when it comes right down to how did they nail him, nothing, man. Nothing about how did they put the nail in his hand. How many times did the hammer come down? How many times did they miss and hit his fingers? We got nothing of that. See, if I'd have been writing that, I'd have written chapter after chapter on that stuff. Why? Because it sells, and I'm into that. But they eliminated it. They took the whole thing and wrapped it up in a simple statement, and they crucified him. Why? Because it doesn't matter. See, how many times they hit the nail doesn't matter. The description of the seeing of doesn't, no. It's, did you get the truth, man? Did you hear? Did you hear? In fact, seeing and hearing are so interwoven that in the New Testament, it's all wrapped up in the idea of revelation. So when you read about seeing, most often in the New Testament, it has to do with, oh, I get it. So in our word, there's two word groups. There's the seeing, physical seeing, which we're not against. Physical seeing, but there's also the idea of knowing, grasping, understanding, getting a hold of, experiencing, understanding. So when you put those two ideas together, it's, oh, I see that. Meaning what? I see it, but I see it. So this word always combines the two ideas of physically seeing, yeah, but oh, it's the embracing of truth and the revelation. And you understand, you can see without seeing, hear without hearing. Matthew chapter 13. And Jesus said, I'm telling you parables. You know why? Because hearing you don't hear, and seeing you don't see. And this word, a combination of this, seeing, hearing, all coming together, grasping, understanding, seeing, grasping, understanding, that combination shows up 4 times in this passage. Now, we have a class in the School of Practical Ministry called Proclamation of the Truth, or something like that. Anyhow, it's a class on preaching. So what we've been teaching is that every good sermon has a proposition, which is the whole sermon reduced down to one sentence. So you ought to be able to stand up in front of a congregation and say, hey, here's what I'm going to tell you. Well, I seldom do that, so I decided to do what I teach. Here's the proposition. Oh, you got to get this. It's phenomenal. What God reveals in the past. Oh, by the way, this is an overall view of the wise men. And this is what Matthew is trying to tell us in this passage. What God reveals in the past. You do have a past. What God reveals in the past, He makes clear in the present, bringing us to Jesus. What God reveals in the past, He makes clear in the present and brings us to Jesus. Not theology, Jesus. Not church organization, Jesus. What God reveals in the past, He makes clear in the present and brings us to Jesus. Now, most of you say, that's all I need, let's go home. But we're not going to do that, so sit down. Let's discuss the past. Verse 2. Verse 1, now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? We have seen, combination, physically saw, and got a hold of. Physical seeing and revelation. Physical seeing and, whoa, this star is talking to us. Combination. His star in the east, and have come to worship. That's the past. 2 years from this event, 2 years in the past from this event, a star showed up and they got it. How did they get it? You look at a star, whoa, stars don't talk to me. I don't get it. This was a spatial star, got that. This was formed and shaped and manipulated by God, got that. This star showed up, gave them a message, and then in the present showed up again and actually led them right to the house and said, right there. There was a manipulation of this planet by a divine God, maybe created spatial for this time, I don't know. There's a whole study on that. You can look it up. We got videos of it. It's all there. But there was a revelation that took place in the past. How did they get it? 2 years ago. How did they get it? Story of Daniel is phenomenal. If you haven't read the book lately, the book of Daniel, you ought to do that. I know, it's a lot of prophecy in it, but hey, skip over that. Just deal with the story. Neat. The story of Daniel, you know the stories. Come on. Daniel in the lion's den. His 3 friends. Who were his 3 friends? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And fiery furnace story. So you got lion's den story. You got fiery furnace story. Oh, you got the handwriting on the wall story. That whole thing. So you got that story all coming out of Daniel. You know how the book starts? The book starts with Nebuchadnezzar marches right down to Jerusalem, Israel, and literally besieges them, the King James says, besieges them, went after them, conquered them, and dragged them off into exile. So Israel has been bad, therefore their guard is down, therefore the enemies of Israel can come in upon them and conquer them. And they did. No doubt Nebuchadnezzar killed a lot of the soldiers, killed them all maybe, who knows, and ransacked the place and took them off into exile. But he saved the sharpest, good-looking, intelligent, strong young men of Israel, which you no doubt would have been a part of. So he saved them because he had a plan. His plan was that he was going to take these young men, probably teenagers, these young men, and he was going to train them in the ways of Babylon. He turned them over to, guess who? Wise men. Well, who were the wise men? Astrologists. Who were the wise men? They were the boys that were the scientists of their hour. They were the boys that were the smartest, most intelligent. They were the right-hand men of the king. When the king wanted information, when he needed to make decisions, when he had to know stuff, he came to the wise men for advice, for input, to find out what was going on. They knew. They were mystics as well. So he turned these young men over to them and said, hey, you train them, a 3-year program. They're going to be in a 3-year program. We'll see how it all works out. So 3 years, Daniel and his best friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are in this training period. They start out with a training period. This is really neat. Start out with a training period, and the king says, hey, during this time, you can have anything to eat off of my table. Everything I eat, you can eat. Everything I drink, you can drink. So what's on his table? Oh, there's all this rich meat. Pork. There's all this rich meat. There's all of these, this rich dessert. There's coffee. All this stuff, It's all laid out on the table, man. You can eat and devour all you want. Hey, because you're special. You're in training. And Daniel looked at all this stuff and said, coffee? Yuck. Pork? No. I'm not eating that stuff. Well, obviously his life was going to be threatened on that. But he made a bargain with the king and said, listen, test us for 10 days. Dare you, dare you, dare you. Test us for 10 days. Give us a chance on this. Hey, we're wise guys, so test us on this. 10 days, we'll eat what we want to eat. 10 days, your other wise men can eat what the other young men that are being trained, they can eat what they want to eat off your table, and we'll just see who's the best looking, who's the strongest, who's the most alert. King said, okay. So Daniel ate green beans, asparagus, spinach. This is really turning you on, isn't it? And wouldn't drink coffee and eliminated all the strong drinks. Everybody else, desserts, gorged themselves. At the end of 10 days, Daniel and his boys, strong, alert, on top, ready to go. And the other guys, what? And suddenly Daniel was elevated in the mind of the king. The king had a dream. And when he had this dream, he was troubled by it. And said, hey, call the wise men in. I want them to interpret this dream. The problem was, how do I know what they tell me is the truth? So they may interpret the dream and say, this is what the dream means, but how am I going to know that? He said, I know how I'll find out. I won't tell them what the dream is. So they're not only going to have to tell me what the dream is, they're going to not only have to give me the interpretation of the dream, they're going to have to tell me what the dream is to start with. And the wise men all said, that's not fair. But Daniel stepped up and said, wait a minute, don't kill these boys, because he was about to. Don't kill these boys because they're sluggish. They've been eating off your table. Don't kill these boys because they can't figure things out. Hey, their brain, they've been drinking your coffee. Don't kill these boys. Give them a chance. Give me a chance. And since the king had been impressed before, he said, okay, give me one night, and I'll give you the answer in the morning. Went to bed that night. God spoke to Daniel, told him exactly what the dream is and exactly what the interpretation was. He came back the next morning and said, King, here's your dream, here's the interpretation. The king was blown away. And Daniel said, wait a minute. Don't get carried away. Don't whack me on the back. Don't say, oh, you're great, Daniel. No, don't say you're so what. No. You know where I got this? Lord God Jehovah revealed this to me. And I serve my God. And the whole answer to my life is my God. Wow, your God, the king said, must be the God of all gods. He said, you're right on that one. And the king said, I'm making a decree that everybody in Babylon is going to worship your God. In fact, Daniel, since you got this together, boy, I can see that. I'm making you the head wise man of all the wise men. Whoa. You're going to run the show of all the knowledge of all the smart boys in Babylon. What about my friends? Oh, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Oh, those boys? Yeah. And he elevated them as well. So Daniel is in charge of the wise men, training them. What do you think he taught them? How to play pool? He taught them about the Lord God Jehovah. And he taught them about there's one God. And he would have trained them. And he would have infiltrated them with that. And he taught them what? Oh, that one God of ours is going to come and be a deliverer. And he's going to be born as a king. And he told them the whole story of the deliverance and the Messiah and all that's going to take place. And out of that came what? Lion's den scene. Fiery furnace scene, which only elevated all of Babylon and the wise men and their opinion of our God. And the handwriting on the wall all came out of that, which all elevated what? The idea, God, Lord God Jehovah, man. You don't mess with him. Why? Because he's sending a deliverer, and Christ was promoted. And you know how long? That was about 600 or 700 years before Jesus' birth. These wise boys coming. So these wise men from Babylon wake up one day, see a star, and say, wow. Daniel told us about a star would appear. We read about that. Some guy by the name of Daniel, 600 years ago, talked about it. I wonder. See, God planted a seed, and this is interesting. There's a sermon in this. What was bad, Israel's been bad, I know. Their defenses are down, I got it. They've gone into exile, oh my. A lot of them got killed, you're dead right. This is awful, I know. But isn't it amazing how God takes what is awful and turns it around and makes it good? Well, my past is, I got that. Well, it's off. I know. I don't want to talk about my past. You're right. I don't want to hear it. So there's your past. I got that. But don't you understand? God can take what is bad and literally bring a revelation of himself that ends up to be, whoa! And marches it into the present and makes it clear until a star shows up and we say, I know what this means. I'm not going to do that. I was going to tell you about my story, but I'm not going to do that. But you got a story, and I don't want you to tell it to me, but I want you to know. I want you to go back in your past. And do you understand that God is taking your past and he's stomping it into the present, and what he's tried to reveal to you back there that you may not have listened to, and what he tried to reveal back there that you maybe weren't able to grasp, what he tried to bring to you back there that you probably didn't get all there was to it, he has marched it into the present and has literally revealed it, clarified it again. And what God reveals in the past, he makes clear in the present, all for the purpose of bringing you to Jesus. And your past is an interaction of God in your life. And don't come to me and say, well, God showed me a star last night. Yeah, let's go back 600 years and see where he started this thing. Because he didn't just show up yesterday, folks. And day after day and day after day in your past, in your childhood. Well, it was abusive. In your childhood, Well, it wasn't what I didn't have good parents. Okay. In your child, well, my high school experience, well, I got that. And well, hey, in your marriage, well, my marriage wasn't. Well, I've been divorced. Well, okay, all of that. All right, there it all is. But don't you see that God was interacting in all of that and has brought you here in a revelation from all of that? And you got another chance. And what God reveals in the past. Well, he spoke to me back there. I know. I rejected. I got that. But he's utilizing all of that. And a star has appeared. And he's talking again. Doesn't that give you just encouragement? See, this is not a, don't look like you look. This is a, whoa, folks, we got another chance. And it's clearer than it was back there. And what I messed up back there, and when it was bad back there, and yet God utilized it back there to give me a message, it's clearer now than it's ever been. And I see. So what God revealed in the past, he's bringing into the present for the sake of bringing you to Jesus. Oh, go to verse 9. Here's the present. When they heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them. So it's present tense now. Here it is again. Till it came and stood over where the young child was. Isn't that phenomenal? What the wise men saw in the past, others laughed at. Yeah, laughed at them. Hey, they brushed it off. But the wise men have followed it for 2 years. And here's the star again, bringing them to the exact spot where Jesus dwelt. It's beautiful. Now the story expands a bit because this is about wise men. I got that. But what about Herod? See, we could walk through this same thing with Herod because God's been talking to Herod in the past. Brought him to this point. And can you imagine? Oh, we could do the same sequence with Israel. Come on. They went to the scriptures. Well, sure. And when they went to the scriptures, what did they do? What did they see? What God revealed in the past. Prophecy. That the Christ child was going to be born in Bethlehem. Do you realize that was 5 miles down the road? We said last night, it's so ironic that here's the Israelites who have the scriptures. Here's the Israelites who got the structure. Here's the Israelites who have the temple. Here's the Israelites who make the sacrifices. Here's the Israelites who have their God living in their temple in their city. And his son is born. A new king is born 5 miles down the road, and they don't even know it. So how does he get the word to them? Well, he sends some Jehovah's Witnesses over. Isn't that amazing? And you'd say, what? Jehovah's Witnesses banging on my door telling me a Christ has been born? Get out of here. See, we got it. We know it, man. We got her down, boy. And he's born 5 miles down the road. And what does God have to do? Send a bunch of pagans to us and say, hey. And Israel wouldn't even go the 5 miles. They read the scriptures and wouldn't even. Wise men have been running up and down their streets saying, hey, your king has been born. And they went and found out where he was going to be born. And they wouldn't even go. They wouldn't make the. Wouldn't you just say, listen, I'll take my wife out for dinner and we'll make it a date and down. It'd be no big deal. At least let's go see. They wouldn't even do that. Oh, they had a committee meeting. So they couldn't make it. And missed it. So see, God took what was revealed in the past, made it clear in the present. Yeah, made it clear in the present. Got that. The wise men are, whoa, here it is. I'm mad. And the Israelites are, who cares? And all of this was to bring them to Jesus. To Jesus. To Jesus. Maybe that's the difficulty. See, if you'd have had a class on the new twist to theology, I might have showed up. Because I like to debate. See, if you'd have had a class, if this had been all about a new set of rules, I might have come. We're adding one more to the 613 oral traditions. Oh, I'd have showed up for that one. I would have showed up for that one. Because I'm against it. I can hardly keep the 613. Let's not add one. See, I would have come to that. But all of this was just Jesus. The star has appeared, and at the bottom of the star is the winning ticket to the lottery. Would you come? See, we'd buy that. Why isn't Jesus enough for us? See, why am I so off balance that Jesus doesn't? Why are my desires and my wants and what I consider my needs, why are they so out of control that Jesus just doesn't? Maybe because I've never come to the house. I've never really seen him. I've never really fell. I never really opened up my life and said, hey, have my treasures. Maybe that's why. Do you suppose? Jesus, you've talked to us in the past. Oh, my. Through all the upbringing and the abuse and all the stuff that's happened to me in the past, you spoke to me in the past. The star appeared in the past. You brought a Daniel. You planted a seed. And it's all come thundering into the present. And here I am seeing truth. And it's you. And you've made it clearer this year at Christmas time than any other time in my life. That this is about you and me. And are we going to get together like we ought to? Am I going to trust you? I pray in the name of Jesus that you would expand my faith, that you would literally build my confidence, that you'd literally reveal yourself and just suck me in as I've never been before. I just pray with my whole being, oh God, that you would take me to a new level of interaction with you more than I've ever had in my whole life. I pray in this moment that you would capture me like you've never captured me before. And that all other agendas would be set aside and all other needs and desires would be pushed aside. And you would absolutely be enough for my life. Heads are bowed. This will sound a little strange. Bear with me. Why don't you come and kneel? Not because you've been bad. We're not dealing with that. Not to get forgiveness of sins. We're not dealing with that. Not because you got a problem and you need a solution. We're not dealing with that. Not because you're up against a wall and you need a way out. We're not dealing with that. Not because you need a physical touch. We're not dealing with that. Would you just see Him? Adore Him physically, mentally, combined together in a revelation where the person of Jesus becomes enough for you. And would you just let everything fall in its slot? Would you just let everything spill out of that? Would you let that become the number one deal in your life? Because He's revealed Himself in the past. And now He's made it really clear in the present. And it's all to bring you into more intimacy, tighter interlocking, stronger focus on the person of Jesus. Would you embrace Him in a new way today? Be obedient.